Welcome back to another episode of Endurance Insights. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm going to go over, after an exciting weekend last weekend, a little recap and some learnings from the Ironman World Championship that was just this past weekend in Nice, France. The last iteration of it before it goes back to Kona next year. Men and women are coming back together in Kona. So this was the last one on this epic, and I say epic course because it is no joke, probably the toughest bike course on the circuit. And then, yeah, just a beautiful course and a really entertaining race, what panned out to be. So let's give a quick recap of the race. So it was a record-breaking day. Started off with a swim that was kind of led by a bunch of guys who apparently had a WhatsApp group before that was like Jamie Riddle, Martin Van Riel, Jonas Schomburg, Andreas Salvesberg, and supposed to be Sam Laidlow in there too. And they pushed hard. I think the swim time ended up being about 45 minutes, which is very fast for a non-wetsuit swim. And that group kind of got away. It ended up being about a pack of like 8 to 10 in the front, and the other groups weren't too far back. But the big story in the swim was probably about a K in. Sam Laidlow pulls up and is like holding his back and looks like he's about to drop out. Apparently, he had some back cramps that happened that he's never had before, and he thought he was going to have to drop out. He ended up kind of figuring things out, sticking in the race, and he ended up only coming out like I think about 2 minutes down or something like that. He was with the Christian Hogenhau group. So he was a little ways back and had to, it looked like he really needed some time to sort of cruise through transition and get going on the bike. But once they got on the bike, that group kind of Schomburg, Riddle, Martin was away for a super long time, all the way till pretty much the flat and almost the downhill. But the cool story was Sam Laidlow got his legs back under him and really started making his way through the field. He ended up in a pack with Christian Blumenfeld, Gustav Eding, Casper Stornes, Nick Thompson. A bunch of them were all together there, a couple minutes down, and just kind of holding the gap there for a while. Nobody behind was really making up much ground. Magnus was in there with them as well, but he ends up sort of having a rough part on the back of the bike and kind of ends up DNFing on the run. But what happens is late in the bike, Sam Laidlow starts to push it and takes Christian Blumenfeld with him up to the front towards Martin Van Riel. At this point, Schomburg and Riddle are starting to struggle and go backwards, but Thompson, Casper, and Gustav continue to push on the downhill to try and keep the gap. And I think Christian and Sam were probably thinking, oh, we got to get away from those other guys and we can make this into if we can put 4 or 5 minutes into them, then hey, now we have a great gap for the run. But what ends up happening actually is Gustav and Casper and Nick Thompson do an awesome job on the descent. And actually, by the time they get to the flat on the promenade, have caught back up to Christian Blumenfeld, Sam Laidlow, and Martin Van Riel. So now we're into an epic run battle. So everybody gets off the bike together, which is really cool. Thompson has a slow transition, so he's kind of off the back. Sam and Martin get out front right away, but the Norwegians before even the 5K mark, Christian and Gustav bridge up to the front, and then Casper makes his way there eventually. What was happening on these stretches is on the way out of town, it was tailwind. On the way back, they had a strong headwind coming back to town. So we had this epic part going into the wind from 5 to 10K where they were almost echeloning and running all together, the top five of them, which was really cool. Eventually, what happens is Christian and Gustav push the pace and get away, and they're leading, and Casper's just kind of hanging in the distance a little ways by, but it looks like he's super patient and his form looks great the whole time. And then what happens is Casper actually catches up to them, and then Casper and Christian end up dropping Gustav. And then Casper just kind of holds the same sort of 330 per kilometer. He said he was going to run to sub 230, 330K pace the whole entire way, and ends up eventually dropping Christian. Christian struggles with some cramping and Gustav catches him. So then it ends up being a full Norwegian podium. Casper first, Gustav, great to see him back on the podium, ends up in second. Christian limping into the finish line in the last 1 or 2K with a lot of cramps. And then We also had in the top 10 Martin Van Riel. Awesome job coming fourth, given he had definitely some struggles with his ankle injury. Sam Laidlow fifth, still ran 2:42, which is almost what he won with the year before. And he did almost the same time he won with, but ends up fifth this time. Schomburg sixth, Nick Thompson seventh, Marquardt in eighth. Patrick Langer runs 2:31 to finish ninth, 22 minutes back. He just lost way too much time. And a guy you got to love, Jamie Riddle, just like dictated a lot of that race, ends up 10th. I think he's going to be, once he gets that rundown, he is going to be in the mix for many years. But some people outside the top 10, maybe we were shocked to see. Rudy Von Berg looks like he struggled a bit, ends up 13th. Sam Long ends up 14th. I think that's actually a pretty decent race for him. Cam Worth down in 21st. Chevalier in 25th. Not a great race for him. And then I think it was about 25% of the field dropped out. But record breaking, three guys under 8 hours, all three Norwegians. And then Sam Laidlow broke the bike course record going 4:29. So that's insane on that course, going 40K an hour for that. And then Casper under 2:30 with a 2:29 marathon. So pretty cool race, pretty amazing race. It was really fun to watch. I stayed up all night watching it. And yeah, hopefully we will have epic races in Kona and Marbella coming up as well. So, what are some things I noticed from this that could be some learnings for us everyday sort of athletes? So, one of them, biggest one for one like this, and one for like a Marbella course or courses that are more complex, is knowing the course and doing as much recon as you can. So, we have great apps like Ruvi these days where you can ride a bunch of the course and start to understand from the course profile and course maps what you're up against. And if you have options in your area, obviously trying to run through as much on that descending and technical work as you can, as well as climbing practice. But I think what the Norwegians said is they spent so much time on this course. They went in January and February, and then I believe another camp, and they had just reconned every bit of that course. And I think that was so important to being technically sound on this, because knowing the course was obviously important, because it brings me to my next point that the swim and bike, you can't win the race, but you definitely can lose it. We look at guys like Sam Long and Patrick Lange, who lost the race on those and had solid runs and stuff like that, but just were never in the race because their swim and bike weren't there. So the bike recon was a huge one on this one. And obviously bike strength was an important one, but swim was really important too. There was still pack dynamics in the sort of flat section to start and on the top of the course. So just a reminder for people, like the run in the end often is like the biggest dictator, but if you're so far back after that, you need to have that swim and bike in a good spot. So when people aren't doing their swim training for something like an Ironman and are bleeding and want to be competitive or want to hit PBs and they're bleeding 20, 30 minutes, that would just take a bit more time investing in the swim, then I think you're really leaving a lot on the table there. So do enough of investment to get yourself to that level. And remember, you can't win the race, but you can lose it in those sections. Brings me to my next point, which is run pacing in the heat and humidity. Casper, I think, really showed in this one that he knew his paces in certain conditions and what he needed to do from a nutrition standpoint. And he just ran even 330 kilometers and let everybody kind of ebb and flow in front of him and get hung up on what others around were doing and let those dictate their day, versus he knew his paces and he just stuck to them. And like, he obviously has the luxury of being able to run a 2:29 and not feel that pressure from somebody else to have to do something drastic. But even a good lesson for all of us is, like, you could have some faster guy go by you, and that doesn't mean that that person's going to go beat you. You need to be within yourself and perfectly measure that so you empty the tank at the end and not too early. So I think that's a great lesson there. Like Blumenfeld, for example, he went extra hard on the bike to keep up with Laidlow to hopefully get a gap there. It didn't work out with him on the bike, and then he's surging on the run up to follow Gustav. And I think he just followed too many moves that weren't his own and got out of his own element, where I think if he just stayed patient and stuck in that Casper Gustav group, kind of ran with Casper the whole time and then probably could have gassed him on the last 10K and ran 2:28. We know KB has that in him. And they were saying with their training environment that he was leading all of the workouts the whole way and like the bike and run side of things. So he probably had the best fitness of all of them, but tactically, Casper just played it way better than him on this race. So just a good note there. It's easy to get hung up on your A races and want to really race in the moment, but you also got to remove yourself from that and make sound decisions to get yourself to the finish line in the fastest way possible, especially if you're somebody who's looking to do like Kona qualification in the next bit. So you can secure that like by winning your age group. But if you're not winning your age group, getting to that finish line as fast as possible and not taking crazy risks to maybe blow up and lose 20 minutes at the end is what's going to matter most with the age graded system. So just remembering that. Another huge one, like we were talking about here with their training environment, is yeah, the training environment was so important to these guys going one, two, three. The one thing that's so good about a training environment is, especially if you have a cohesive group, is it's okay if somebody's struggling on the day, they go more to the back of the pack and they just more hang on for that day, and they maybe are on the front a little more on the days they're feeling strong, but you kind of move the whole group and stick everyone together and keep pushing forward versus when you're doing a lot of your training solo, you just don't have maybe that extra push you need on those tough days to really stick in it. And I think, yeah, if you can set up your training environment with great people around you or low barriers to being able to get your workouts done, and setting up your environment to be able to optimize your recovery. So be able to eat meals before and after your workouts and having low barriers to be able to get your carbs that you're going to take on the bike and run, and even where you live, like is it close to places where you're going to enjoy training. And I think the more you can do those things and set your environment up, the more you are going to be consistent and want to do more activity. And we know these endurance sports, for the most part, there is a certain buy-in in terms of volume if you actually want to be competitive and improve. And if you're going to enjoy doing it, you're probably going to do more of it. And I can plot almost on the curve my athletes. Those who do the most in the year are the ones that have mostly the fastest results and stack a bunch of that year over year because they enjoy doing it. And yeah, you just get way better results that way. And then I think the final piece I just wanted to touch on learnings there were hearing about some of the insane fueling totals. So I was hearing a lot of guys were doing something in the like 120 to 180 grams an hour on the bike and averaging close to like 120 grams for the entire race. It's not to say us age groupers who are doing like some of us double the time of what they're doing or 50% more of the time need to do quite that high of totals, because they're running at such a high capacity and burning so many calories per hour that they need to do that to sustain that. But still, remembering like when we get, for most of us age group triathletes, getting in that 60 to 100, 110 grams, especially if you're a faster athlete, that 100, 110 grams, or a bigger athlete could be super important on the bike. And then coming down to the run, probably in the 50 to 75 grams an hour range. Again, if you're running faster or a bigger athlete, maybe you're going more in the 70 to 90 grams per hour range. And the more you can practice that and take in those carbs, the more you're going to be strong all the way to the end of the race. And then obviously don't neglect the hydration side of things, which is one I'm seeing a lot of people struggle on recently. If you miss that one, like it can just ruin your race and it takes so long to replenish the hydration side of things versus sodium and carbs. You can smash a bunch of that and be good to go again in 5-10 minutes and feel fine. But the hydration takes so long to replenish. So do not get behind on that. That is one where people are always cramping and they're like, oh, I'm just low on sodium. But a lot of times it's just their overall hydration combined with maybe some over pacing and then maybe being a little bit low on sodium. But if you nail the hydration part, and have some sort of sodium in there with it, for most people, you will avoid most of that cramping. Anything else? Toss them in the comments there if you noticed any interesting things from the races or things you maybe learned from watching a race like this. And we will see you next week. Cheers.